Hello and welcome back to another Ben 10 Customs video. Got an interesting base for this figure this week. So this is a BBC Doctor Who werewolf figure. You can see the sheer size of it. That's just a Marvel Legends Sandman there. So he's pretty big. His articulation isn't the best. I mean, he gets into some alright poses. I got this for like a £5 off of eBay. The body and the lower leg articulation is what I'm really interested in here, and that head movement is going to be great. There's also a great head sculpt, it's a shame to be wasting it. But we need to get rid of that, and I'll get rid of the tail as well. Don't cut towards yourself like I did. That's an easy way to cut your finger off. Not off, but get a nice big slice through your finger. I ended up using wire cutters to remove his arms. Worked out a lot simpler, and then just twisted the rest off since I'm going to be sanding it and drilling it anyway. You can see with both arms off there, I'm starting to get a nice kind of front on shape of what he'll look like. And if you ignore the legs, you've got the kind of correct back arch that Wildmutt has. So now using some Marvel Legends, I believe these are the retro symbiote legs. I had this just in my fodder pile. You see they line up quite nicely with the leg there, because the lower leg is the only bit I really want. So just making a little mark and a cut. And we've got the shorter legs there. And I'm not happy with how long these legs are. I feel like they're slightly too long for the way that they're meant to bend. I feel like the ankle should be closer to the knee, really. So I do end up making a second cut, because this looks a lot nicer, in my personal opinion. So that's with it cut off. Hopefully you can see here that if I get the right leg, it lines up a little bit nicer. You have an overall shape that matches better, and from front on and side on, the shapes are almost the same now. So just using a scalpel to actually drill a main hole for the drill bit, just as like a center punch really. This is a 3.5mm drill bit, and you want it to be big enough to take the main base of the peg, but not for the actual mushroom shape. And then heating it up, force it in, leave it to cool down, and it will basically form its own little clip. Now looking at his fluffy taint, he's getting a little bit of a castration here. This didn't feel the best to be doing, but you can see I'm also just prying it off here, and just letting the top bit crack. And now rough little shape, and I think that should look good. And out onto the head and the other 3D printed bits. So this looks like a bit of a jump. Don't worry, I will be showing you the majority of how I did this, as well as how I made this new kind of crotch joint that will actually take the Marvel Legends ones instead of the original hinge legs. Now I did end up retweaking this design a little bit. I made the bar too short to begin with, so this is the V2. I made the bar longer just to space the legs out a bit further apart. And this is how Wildmutt's head started. I imported that shape into Blender, put it back into Tinkercad, which is the one you're seeing here, added the hinge and separated the jaw, put it back into Blender, and did all the sculpted detail, including the teeth and whatnot. I ended up leaving this block in the back, but actually ended up helping to get a good bit of adhesion for the hot glue, which I used to make the joint, because I didn't make it in the 3D software. Then here you can see the actual hip joint working quite nicely. Gluing the crotch back on. You've got a big gap, but I'm going to be using some milliput later on to cover that up anyway. And then sanding away all the texture that I don't want, blending the textures together, thinning the legs down a bit just so they match a little bit nicer with Wildmutt's kind of weird thin back end, really broad front end. And then you can kind of see just what I've done with this milliput. Same stuff I used on Heat Blast. Fills in the gaps and the cracks that I don't want visible, smooths over all the fur texture that I don't want on his back. Then you can see I really sanded down these. I also went ahead and primed them grey. And you can see he's missing a toe now as well. I did go and lop off a toe. He's got 3 toes, and I'm not having it be inaccurate in this way. So I did just cut that off. Now these are Ursa Major arms, the Build-A-Figure part. That's a 5.5mm drill bit. Once they're drilled, same as the legs, heat it up, force the joint in, and then let it cool down, and you've got a nice socket. I did also go and cut one of these claws off, which ended up being the inner one in between the thumb and what would be the middle finger. This is just a styrene strip, you can see it's a cube, 2mm, and perfect. This took a lot longer than just that little clip, and I had to angle them and sand them. And then I wanted to film a nice little process of putting each one on individually and cut it so it was satisfying to watch. Ended up not working out because when I got to this third one, I for whatever reason struggled so much to actually glue it in place. And then after reviewing it from front on, wasn't happy with the length difference between the three of them, so I removed it and put a different one on anyway. So I did all the spikes off camera. And now the only other issue I have is that the Ursa Major arms don't have the weird elbow spike that Wildmutt has. So I'm just going to go and use a bit more Milliput. And you can see here this is just my sculpting process to kind of blend it in. I don't want to be adding the fur texture to the spike. I don't think that would work out very well, and to be honest at this point I don't have the time. So I'm making sure it blends nicely with the fur, so it's not going to be very noticeable that there's like a whole different material there. I did also go and do his shoulder pad, which is just 3 different layers of cut Milliput, so not very interesting there. Now after having a little play, now that I like his proportions, I did go and paint him, and you can see I used all of one brand. This worked quite nicely. So I've got the matte primer, the orange, and the matte like varnish that goes over the top. This was a very glossy orange, so the fact that the matte struggled kind of shows through a bit. It didn't like mattify it as much as I would have liked, but I'm perfectly happy with this. The claws are grey. I used latex to mask those off, and then just peeled the latex off once the orange was done. But onto the paints that I used, like for painting the rest of him, I mean. So I've got the black and white there for his shoulder pad. The orange and this matte lacquer are going to be for the touch-ups where the paint's rubbed. And that weird off-white, grey and yellow are going to be for his teeth. I'll be mixing those two up. And I'll be using this permanent marker to do his lips, because it's a lot easier than trying to do it with a paintbrush. Now I did do all of it off screen. I know some of you like seeing the painting process. Because he's such an awkward shape, it's very difficult to keep my arms around the camera and painting him like accurately, especially with the light in front of my face. It's basically just quite difficult, and it was a very basic thing to be painting. There was just block colours. If I do something more complicated in the future, I'll try and film the process, but for this one I don't think it was that important. And that's the yellow I used, or the mix that I made, if you guys want to try and colour match. Now he's clearly missing one more thing, so I'm going to making some scores so that the glue can kind of adhere a little bit nicer than it would have done without. Here's the Omnitrix. Again, 3D printed, a little bit of paint. And then making sure I don't make the same mistake again. So you can see I'm being very, very careful with this one and very gentle. I will have the kits for Heat Blast and Wildmutt up on my Etsy, hopefully on Monday. I'm trying to make a couple like minor changes to the sculpt before I put them up on there, just so they're a little bit easier to use. And that's him done. I am very happy with how this came out. Is it 100% accurate proportions? No, of course not. It's a kit bash. I've taken Marvel Legends, random Doctor Who figures, 3D prints, bits of styrene, bits of Milliput, and chucked it all together. So, no, it's not going to be perfect by any means. Are there bits I could have spent more time doing? Of course there are. Am I happy with it regardless? Yes. I'm so happy with how this thing came out. He gets into some great poses. I'm a little bit dubious with posing him in this video because obviously some of the paint's still drying. And yeah, he's got a presence to him, which is very bizarre. Just some stupid poses that I got with him. It would be nice if the head got a bit more movement. This is absolutely cursed. The fact that he can stand up on his hind legs is terrifying. But yeah, he's got the Wildmutt proportions, he's got the colours, he's got the shaping. And I'm very happy with how I've managed to bring the cartoon into action figure form. His back end could have used a bit more work, but I kind of figured no one's really going to be looking at it, so I'm going to hide it. Just did the Hasbro method of not putting much effort into the back. So there he is with Heat Blast. You can see how he scales with a relatively standard 6-inch figure. And I think this scales really well as far as Wildmutt goes. He is meant to be just a large mutt. I mean, clues in the name, it's called Wildmutt, so he's meant to be kind of just like a big dog, really. And yeah, very happy with this. So thank you guys so much for watching. It will probably be another 2 weeks before I get around to doing Diamond Head. I think he's next. Yeah, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.